"Mom, I had a set of keys made for our house," the groom said at the wedding, handing his mother the keys to my house. A few minutes later, the wedding MC took the microphone and announced, "And now, a special gift from the bride for the groom and his mother." And right then, they were both left completely stunned. But before we begin, I ask you to please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy the story. Alice woke up 2 hours before her alarm. 6 a.m. It was still dark outside, but she couldn't sleep anymore. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of her suburban home. In 8 hours, her life was supposed to change. A wedding, a white dress, rings, vows, guests, romance. Except, everything was going to go completely differently than her fiancé, Daniel Morrison, had planned. And certainly not the way his mother, Valerie, was calculating. Alice sat up in bed, rubbed her face with her hands, and switched on the nightstand lamp. A soft light spilled across the bedroom, illuminating the familiar walls, the light oak dressers, the nightstand with her photographs. Her bedroom, in her house, which she had bought entirely on her own 3 years ago. She got up, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtains. April in Washington state had been cold. Patches of snow still lingered on the lawn, even though it was the middle of the month. The apple trees stood bare, their black branches poking into the gray sky. In a month they would bloom, covered in white and pink flowers, smelling of spring. But Alice didn't know whether she would be watching that bloom alone or with a husband. Although, to be honest, she already knew the answer. Alice went downstairs barefoot. The wooden staircase creaked under her feet. The house was chilly. She had turned on the heat last night, but the air had cooled by dawn. She walked into the kitchen, turned on the electric kettle, grabbed a yogurt from the fridge, sat at the table, and began to eat. The metal spoon was cold. The strawberry yogurt was sweet. Alice chewed slowly, methodically, though she couldn't taste a thing. She ate because she had to, because today was going to be a long day, and she needed her strength. Her phone vibrated on the table, the screen lighting up. A message from Daniel. "Good morning, my beautiful bride. I can't believe that in a few hours you'll be my wife. I'm so happy. I love you more than life." Alice read it, placed the phone face down, and didn't reply. She finished her tea, ate the yogurt, stood up, rinsed her dishes, placed them in the drying rack, and wiped the counter. Everything was done slowly, calmly, methodically. No rushing, no nerves. She went back upstairs to her bedroom and opened the closet. Hanging on a hanger was her wedding dress ivory color, a simple cut, no lace or rhinestones. Alice never liked excess. The dress hadn't been expensive, but it looked elegant. She had bought it herself, without the help of bridesmaids, without the advice of her future mother-in-law. She had simply gone to a bridal boutique, tried on 3 styles, and picked the one she felt most comfortable in. Alice ran her hand over the fabric. Smooth, pleasant. She imagined how, in a few hours, she would put this dress on, go to the venue, and smile at the guests. And then Daniel and Valerie would get a lesson they would remember for the rest of their lives. Alice lay back on the bed, picked up her phone, and scrolled through her photos. There she was, 3 years ago, standing on the porch of this house, holding the keys, grinning from ear to ear, incredibly happy. Here she was painting the fence. Here she was planting roses. Here she was sitting on the back deck with a mug of coffee. This house was her American dream, her fortress, her personal space that no one could take away. And it was exactly because of this house that everything had started. 3 years ago, Alice Crawford was 32 years old. She worked as a corporate lawyer at a Seattle construction firm, earned a great salary, and rented an apartment on the outskirts of the city. The apartment was decent, a 2-bedroom, freshly updated, but it infuriated Alice that every month she handed over $2,400 for someone else's property. That money just evaporated. It wasn't saved. It didn't build equity. It didn't turn into something of her own. It just went to her landlady, a heavy-set woman in her 50s, who looked at Alice with poorly concealed disdain every time they crossed paths. "You should be looking for a husband, not drifting around rental units," the landlady would say whenever Alice handed her the rent check. Alice would just hand over the money in silence, turn around, and leave. There was no point in arguing. People of that generation would never understand that a woman could be perfectly happy without a husband. But the housing issue was really stressing her out. Alice started studying the real estate market. Housing prices in the city were astronomical. Even a one-bedroom condo in a suburban neighborhood cost so much she'd be paying off a 30-year mortgage until she was retirement age. Alice ran the numbers, built spreadsheets in Excel. It turned out she would end up paying the bank almost double what the condo was worth. It seemed foolish. One Friday evening, while Alice was sitting at home with her laptop scrolling through Zillow for the 100th time, she accidentally clicked on the wrong filter. Instead of condos, single-family homes popped up. Alice went to close the tab, but her eyes caught on one listing. A craftsman home in the town of Pine Valley, 1,200 square feet, 2 stories, on a quarter-acre lot, price negotiable. Alice clicked on it. The photos loaded. A 2-story red brick house with tall windows. Inside, it was bright and spacious. A large kitchen with quartz countertops. A living room with exposed wooden ceiling beams. 3 bedrooms upstairs. A master bathroom with a soaking tub and a separate walk-in shower. Alice stared at the photos and felt something inside her click. This was it. This was exactly what she needed. Not a concrete box in a high-rise where neighbors smoked in the hallways and blasted music at night, but a real house with a yard, with silence, with space. She looked at the price and was stunned. The house cost less than a 1-bedroom condo in the city, significantly less. Alice grabbed her phone and dialed the number. It rang for a long time. Finally, a calm, pleasant woman's voice answered. "Hello? Hi, I'm calling about the listing for the house in Pine Valley." "Yes, I'm listening." "Is the house still for sale?" "Yes, it's available." "Would you like to see it?" "I really would. When is a good time? Would tomorrow morning around 10 work for you?" "Perfect. Get a pen. I'll give you the address." The woman gave her the directions. Alice wrote them down, said goodbye, hung up, and immediately went to Google to look up the town. Pine Valley was about 25 miles from the city. The commuter rail took 45 minutes. The town itself had a school, a daycare, a grocery store, and a pharmacy. Paved roads, city gas, high-speed internet, it seemed like a perfectly civilized place. Alice went to bed late, but woke up early. By 8:30 a.m., she was sitting on the commuter train, looking out the window. Snow-dusted fields, small rural towns, and farmhouses flashed by. March wasn't quite over yet. Spring was just beginning, and gray, melting snow still clung to the ground. When the train pulled into Pine Valley Station, Alice stepped off and looked around. A small platform, a wooden station building, a few benches, clean, quiet, with only the wind whistling and a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Alice pulled out her phone and opened Google Maps. The seller had said the house was a 10-minute walk from the station. Alice followed the route. The road led through a quiet neighborhood. The houses were sturdy, mostly brick or timber. Strong fences, closed gates. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, smelling of firewood and something cozy and domestic. Alice walked and thought that a person could truly live here. Quiet, peaceful, far from the city grind. House number 27 was at the end of the street. 2 stories of red brick, exactly like the photos. A wooden fence painted dark green. The gate was slightly ajar. Alice pushed it open and walked onto the property. A woman in her late 50s came out to meet her. She was short, wearing a warm olive green utility jacket and rubber boots. Her graying hair was pulled into a bun. Her face was tired but kind. "Are you Alice?" "Yes." "Hello, Mrs. Vance. Just call me Olivia. Come on in. I'll show you the house." They walked up the path to the porch. Olivia opened the door and let Alice in first. Inside, it smelled of cedar and apples. The entryway was spacious, featuring a solid oak coat rack and a mirror in a simple frame. Hardwood floors, glossy with polyurethane. Olivia kicked off her boots, and Alice took off her shoes. "Come on through to the kitchen." Olivia waved her hand. The kitchen was massive, about 200 square feet. The windows looked out over the backyard. The cabinetry was simple, but custom-built. The countertops were indeed gray quartz. A 4-burner gas stove, a built-in fridge. Everything was spotless and smelled of lemon cleaner. My husband and I built this house 23 years ago, Olivia explained, opening cabinets. He was a structural engineer. He designed it himself, thought of every little detail. See how big the windows are? It lets in so much light. It never feels dark in the winter. Alice nodded, taking it all in. The kitchen really was bright and cozy. From the window, she could see the apple trees, the back fence, and the woods beyond it. Let's go look at the rest. Olivia led Alice into the living room. The living room was huge, around 400 square feet. The ceilings were high, at least 11 feet. Dark, exposed wooden beams stretched across the ceiling. Floor-to-ceiling windows took up an entire wall. There was so much natural light, Alice almost had to squint. In the corner sat a fireplace framed in gray stone. The fireplace works perfectly, Olivia said. You have to buy firewood, of course, but it's wonderful to sit by it in the winter. Alice walked to the window and looked out at the yard. Apple trees, pear trees, blackberry bushes. Everything was dormant under the snow, but would come alive in the spring. What's in there? Alice pointed to a door in the corner of the living room. The study. My husband used to work in there. It's empty now. We sold the furniture. They peeked into the study. A small room, maybe 120 square feet. Window, facing the front yard. Empty. Just some dust on the sill. Let's go upstairs, Olivia suggested. They climbed the wooden staircase. A hallway and 3 doors awaited them. These are the bedrooms. Olivia opened the first door. The master bedroom. We slept here. It was a large room, about 200 square feet, with a big window overlooking the backyard. Empty, save for the built-in closet. The second bedroom is a bit smaller. Olivia opened the next door, about 150 square feet. Our daughter lived here until she moved out. And the third is a guest room. Small, just over 100 square feet, but very cozy. They checked all the rooms, then the main bathroom's spacious, with a corner tub and a separate glass shower, neutral beige tiles. We put that tile in 3 years ago, Olivia said. Everything is practically new. Alice inspected the bathroom and nodded. The house really was in phenomenal condition. They went back downstairs and sat in the kitchen. Olivia put on the kettle and brought out some cookies. Would you like some tea? I'd love some. Olivia brewed the tea and poured it into mugs. They drank in silence for a moment. Alice was thinking. The house was incredible, but the price seemed far too low. Olivia, can I ask you a question? Of course. Why is it priced so low? A house this size, in this condition, usually these go for much more. Olivia sighed and stared down into her mug. My husband passed away 6 months ago. A heart attack, very sudden. My daughter moved to California, got married. I'm left here all alone. The house is big, the yard is a lot of upkeep. I'm turning 60 soon, and I just can't keep up with it. I decided to sell and move out to live with my daughter. She's been begging me to come. I understand. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. You know, the money isn't the most important thing to me right now. What's important is that this house goes to a good person. Someone who will love it and take care of it. My husband and I lived happily here for 23 years. I want this house to keep holding happy memories. Alice nodded. She understood. A house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was memories, emotions, a life. Olivia, I want to buy it. But I don't have the entire sum in cash right now. I could get the rest together in 3 months. Olivia looked at her closely. How much do you have to put down? Alice named the amount. It was her entire life savings from the last 5 years, plus what she could pull from a short-term personal loan. Olivia thought for a moment. All right, let's do this. You pay me what you have now as a down payment. You can pay the rest when you get your financing sorted. I can wait. We'll draw up a contract with an installment agreement. Are you sure? Yes, I like you. You seem serious, grounded. I can tell you're a reliable person. Alice felt a warmth spread through her chest. She wasn't used to people trusting her. Usually, people looked at her with suspicion. A single, 2-year-old woman, no husband, no kids. Weird. But Olivia was looking at her with genuine human kindness. "Thank you," Alice said. "I won't let you down. I'll pay it all on time. I know you." They agreed to meet a week later to sign the paperwork. Alice rode the commuter train back home, staring out the window and smiling. Her house. Soon, she would have her own house. The next 3 months flew by in a blur. Alice worked more than usual, took on extra consulting gigs, and pinched every penny. She cooked oatmeal and soup at home, didn't buy a single new piece of clothing, skipped the movies, and hoarded her cash. By late May, she made the final payment. Olivia met her at the title company office. They signed the final transfer of ownership. Alice received the deed, a piece of paper where it stated in black and white, "Sole owner, Alice I. Crawford." "Congratulations." Olivia hugged Alice. "It's yours now. Please take good care of it." Olivia drove away. Alice was left alone in the empty house. She sat on the hardwood floor in the living room, leaned her back against the wall, and just stared at the empty space around her. There was no furniture, no dishes, just walls, a ceiling, and a floor, and it was more than enough. Alice spent her first night in a sleeping bag on the floor. She woke up the next morning to sunshine pouring through the windows. She stood up and walked out onto the front porch. It was June. The air was warm. Birds were singing. It smelled like cut grass and blooming flowers. The neighbor to her left came out into her yard, saw Alice, and waved. "Good morning. Are you the new owner?" "Yes, I'm Alice. I'm Shirley. If you ever need anything, just let me know. We all look out for each other around here." Alice nodded and smiled. The neighbor seemed lovely, a woman in her late 60s wearing a floral cardigan and rubber clogs. Over the next 2 weeks, Alice moved her boxes from the apartment. She bought the most basic furniture: a bed, a sofa, a dining table, chairs, a dresser. Everything was bought used off Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, but it was all in great condition. She bought her kitchenware at a local Target: pots, pans, plates, just the essentials. She managed to transition her job to a hybrid schedule. She agreed with her boss that she would work from home 3 days a week and commute to the Seattle office for 2. Her boss didn't mind. Alice was a top-tier attorney, disciplined and reliable. Where she physically sat didn't matter to the firm. By mid-June, the house felt lived in. The furniture was arranged, curtains hung in the windows, and the fridge was stocked. Alice bought a bicycle and rode it to the train station on her office days. In the evenings, she worked in the yard, raking last year's dead leaves, pulling weeds, and pruning the apple trees. She was happy. Truly, deeply happy. She had her own space, her own territory, where no one could step foot without her permission. No landlord coming by for monthly inspections. No neighbors banging on shared walls during late-night arguments. Only silence, peace, and freedom. Her friends would come up to visit on weekends and shake their heads. "Alice, are you serious? Out here in the middle of nowhere alone?" "It's not nowhere, it's a nice town, and it's only 45 minutes to the city." "Yeah, but it's all retirees out here." "You're young. You need to be in the city, going out, meeting guys." "Why? What do you mean, why?" "To build a personal life." Alice would just shrug. A personal life didn't really interest her. In her 32 years, she had experienced enough disappointment with men. Most of them were either looking for a surrogate mother, a maid, or a sugar mama. Very few wanted an equal partnership, and Alice wasn't willing to mold herself to fit someone else's expectations. She preferred solitude to bad company. But fate, as they say, has a funny sense of humor. In late June, on a sweltering Saturday, Alice physically collided with Daniel Morrison. It happened at the train station. Alice was standing on the platform, waiting for the train into Seattle. She needed to swing by the office to grab some legal files. She was looking down at her phone, reading a work email. The train pulled up, the doors hissed open, and the crowd surged forward. Someone shoved Alice hard from behind. She pitched forward, losing her balance. Her phone flew out of her hand and clattered onto the tracks. Alice reached out to grab the railing but missed. Suddenly, a strong hand gripped her elbow and yanked her backward. "Whoa, careful." Alice spun around. A man in his mid-30s, Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black t-shirt and jeans, dark hair, gray eyes, sporting a 5 o'clock shadow. He was holding her arm, looking at her with genuine concern. "Are you okay?" "Yes, thank you." Alice pulled her arm back and looked down. Her phone was lying on the tracks, the screen shattered like a spider web. "Is that your phone?" the man asked. It was. "Hold on." He quickly dropped down off the edge of the platform, snatched the phone, and hoisted himself back up. He handed it to Alice. "Here you go. Screen is wrecked, but maybe it still works?" Alice took it and pressed the power button. The screen flashed, glitched on the lock screen, and died completely. "It's dead. What a shame." "Sorry, I couldn't save it." "You saved me. I could have fallen onto the tracks." The man nodded and gave a warm, genuine smile. "People act like a stampede around here. It's dangerous standing that close to the edge." They boarded the train and ended up sitting next to each other. The man pulled out his own phone, but didn't bury his face in it. Instead, he looked out the window. "Do you live in Pine Valley?" he asked after a few minutes. "Yeah, I recently moved here. I'm renting a place on the edge of town. I work in the city, so I'm doing this commute every day." "I see. I'm Daniel, by the way." He offered his hand. "Alice." They shook. Daniel's hand was warm and calloused, a firm handshake, but not aggressive. "Been out here long?" he asked. "About a month. I've been here 6 months. I'm used to it now. I like how quiet and peaceful it is." "Yeah, that's definitely a plus." They fell silent. The train rattled along the tracks as the scenery rushed by. Alice stared out the window, mentally calculating the cost of a new iPhone. Perfect timing. An unplanned expense. "Where are you headed in the city?" Daniel asked. "My office, downtown. My car is parked at the station downtown. I can give you a ride if you want." Alice hesitated, a strange man offering her a ride. Usually, she would decline immediately. But on the other hand, he had just saved her from falling onto the tracks and seemed completely normal. He didn't have that predatory stare that guys with bad intentions usually had. "All right, thank you." When they reached the end of the line, they walked to the parking garage together. His car was an older, but very clean, gray Ford Focus. "Hop in." Daniel opened the passenger door for her. Alice got in. Daniel started the engine and pulled out of the garage. "Where to?" Alice gave him the address. Daniel nodded and merged into traffic. He drove smoothly, didn't rage at traffic, didn't curse at other drivers, didn't blast the radio. "What do you do for work?" he asked while stopped at a red light. "I'm an attorney at a commercial construction firm." "Serious stuff." "I'm a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing plant. We make aerospace components." "Sounds interesting." "Mostly it's routine, but it pays the bills." They pulled up to Alice's office building. She thanked him and opened the door. "Alice, wait a second." Daniel reached into the center console and handed her a business card. "Take this. If we run into each other again, I can always give you a lift." "Thanks." She took the card, waved, and walked inside. Daniel drove off. All day, Alice kept thinking about the encounter. Daniel seemed like a genuinely nice guy. No ego, no performative macho nonsense. Just a normal, decent man. They really were a rare breed. That evening, while she was taking the train back home, she got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Daniel. We rode the train together today. Just wanted to see if your phone was fixable." Alice was surprised. How did he get her number? Then she remembered she had handed her own business card to the receptionist at her office while picking up documents. He must have noticed it or asked for it. She texted back, "No, it's fried. I'm going to have to buy a new one." "That sucks." "Hey, I was thinking, would it be easier for you if we just carpooled? I drive into the city every day anyway. I could just pick you up. The commuter train is a nightmare, especially in the mornings." Alice thought about it. The offer was very tempting. The trains really were packed like sardine cans in the morning, and a car ride would be faster and way more comfortable. But on the other hand, she hated relying on anyone else. "Thanks for the offer, but if I need to work late or leave early, I'd rather just handle my own transportation." "Totally get it. No pressure. I'm just throwing it out there. Doesn't have to be an everyday thing. Alice sat with the thought for another minute. Okay, let's give it a try. And that was how Daniel started driving Alice to work 3 days a week. They would text in the mornings to coordinate times. Daniel was always incredibly punctual. He was never late, and he never canceled at the last minute. They rode together, chatting about work, the weather, and life in the suburbs. Daniel was an easy conversationalist. He didn't pry into her personal life, didn't ask invasive questions. He just drove, occasionally making a joke, and was comfortable with silence. Alice grew used to the routine. It became a natural part of her life. Morning coffee, ride her bike to the station parking lot, meet Daniel, drive to Seattle. A month later, they weren't just carpooling. They were texting in the evenings. Daniel would send her funny memes. Alice would reply with dry, sarcastic comments. It was easy, casual, with absolutely zero pressure. One morning in the car, Daniel said, "You know, I feel really comfortable around you. I usually hate giving people rides. People feel the need to talk nonstop. But you know how to just be quiet. It's nice." "I despise small talk," Alice replied, watching the rain hit the window. "Me too." They kept driving. It was pouring outside. The windshield wipers thumped rhythmically. Inside the car, it was warm and cozy. "Can I ask you a personal question?" Daniel asked a few miles later. "Sir, do you live alone? Or is there someone else in the picture?" Alice turned her head to look at him. "Alone. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Sorry if I overstepped." "It's fine." "Yes, I'm alone. And I plan to stay that way. Until I meet someone who actually adds value to my life." Daniel nodded and smiled. "That's a good way to look at it. I agree. Better to be alone than to just settle for whoever's around." "Are you single too?" "Yeah. Divorced 5 years ago. My ex-wife moved to Oregon. We don't talk anymore. No kids." "Got it." They didn't discuss it further, but Alice felt a shift in the air. A connection had formed between them, not wildly romantic, but close. Like they understood each other without having to explain themselves. By late July, Daniel suggested hanging out outside of the commute. "Alice, do you want to grab coffee or see a movie sometime?" "Why?" "Well, just to hang out. Not in a moving vehicle." Alice thought about it. "All right. I'm free Saturday." They met up on Saturday afternoon. Daniel picked her up, and they drove into downtown Seattle to a nice cafe. They ordered coffees and pastries, sat by the window, and people watched. "Are you always this serious?" Daniel asked, stirring his coffee. "Not always, but usually, yes." "Why?" "Just a habit. I grew up in a household where showing emotions wasn't exactly encouraged. My dad was military, very strict. My mom just fell in line to keep the peace. I learned to keep everything internal." "Makes sense." "Are they still around?" "My dad passed away 5 years ago. My mom lives in Arizona. She remarried. We barely talk." "That must be tough." "It's fine. I'm used to it." Daniel nodded and didn't dig any deeper. Alice deeply appreciated that. He didn't try to play therapist, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just accepted her reality for what it was. They talked for 2 hours, then went for a walk through a nearby park. Daniel talked about his job and his goals for the future. Alice listened, occasionally chiming in. She felt completely at ease with him. No stress, no games. When he dropped her off at her house, Daniel said, "I really like spending time with you. Can we do this again?" "We can." He smiled and drove off. Alice walked into her house and sat down on the couch. She felt a warm, quiet peace inside her. It had been a very long time since she felt that way. A long time since she actually wanted to see a man again. Over the next few weeks, they started dating properly. They went for walks, caught movies, grabbed dinners at casual spots. Daniel was attentive, but never clingy. He didn't try to rush physical intimacy, didn't pressure her. He was simply present. In August, they had their first kiss. It happened on her porch after an evening walk. Daniel was dropping her off. He stood by her front door, looking at her. "Alice, can I?" "What?" He leaned in and gently pressed his lips to hers. It was a soft, cautious kiss. Alice didn't push him away. Daniel pulled back and looked into her eyes. Sorry, if that was too fast. It's fine. I really like you. I like you too. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Daniel smiled. I should get going. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. He walked to his car. Alice went inside and leaned back against her front door. Her heart was beating a little faster. It had been years since she let herself feel this. Years since she wanted anyone. The next few months felt like a dream. Road trips, dinners, lazy weekends. Daniel started spending his weekends at Alice's place. They would cook together, watch Netflix, and just talk. Alice was slowly lowering her walls, allowing herself to be vulnerable. In September, Daniel spent the night for the first time. They were lying in bed, Alice resting her head on his shoulder. Alice, I want us to be a real couple, Daniel said quietly. Not just dating. Like, really together. We are together. I mean living together. Building a life. Alice propped herself up on her elbow and looked at him. Dan, I own this house. I'm not moving anywhere. I know. I'm not asking you to. Let me move in here. I'm throwing money away on rent anyway, and you have all this space. It just makes sense. Alice thought about it. She was so used to living alone. Used to her silence, her routine, having everything exactly where she left it. But she loved having Daniel around. He was easy to live with. He didn't make messes. He wasn't demanding. Okay, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. The house remains solely mine. Your name does not go on the deed. We split the utility bills and groceries 50/50, and we maintain separate bank accounts. No commingling finances without my explicit permission. Daniel nodded. Agreed. I don't want your house, Alice. I want you. They kissed. Alice felt a wave of relief. Daniel understood her and respected her boundaries. Daniel officially moved in October. He brought over 2 duffel bags of clothes, a box of books, and his laptop. Alice cleared out half a closet for him and gave him a shelf in the bathroom mirror cabinet. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Having another human being in her space 24/7 was harder to adapt to than Alice anticipated. Daniel wasn't messy, he wasn't loud, he wasn't annoying, but he was there, and she felt it constantly. Alice found herself getting irritable. She wanted silence, but Daniel would have a podcast playing. She wanted to read alone, and Daniel would ask what movie they were watching that night. After a month, she sat him down. Dan, I need my alone time. Please don't take this personally. I'm just incredibly used to my solitude. Let's make an agreement. If I say I need space, you don't get offended. Daniel frowned slightly. Okay, but you have to see it from my side. I need to know I'm not an intruder in my own home. If I'm bothering you, just tell me straight up. You aren't bothering me. I just need room to breathe sometimes. Deal? Deal. They quickly found their rhythm. If Alice wanted quiet, Daniel would go up to the spare bedroom and play video games or read. Alice didn't complain when Daniel invited a couple of buddies over to watch football on a Sunday. They learned to coexist beautifully, without stepping on each other's toes. By winter, Alice realized she couldn't imagine life without him. Daniel had seamlessly woven himself into her life. He didn't smother her, didn't make demands, and didn't try to control her. He was just her partner, and it was wonderful. In December, over dinner, Daniel dropped a bomb. Alice, I want to introduce you to my mom. Alice looked up from her plate. Your mom? Yeah. She's been begging to meet you for months. I talk about you all the time. She lives in an apartment in Seattle. We can drive over on Saturday. Why didn't you mention this earlier? I wanted to make sure we were rock solid first, that this was serious. Alice nodded slowly. All right. We can go. Daniel smiled. She's totally normal, don't worry. She's a sweetheart. Alice didn't mention that she wasn't worried about whether she was a sweetheart. She was worried because mothers-in-law rarely operated on logic, especially the ones who had raised their sons as single mothers. On Saturday, they drove into Seattle. Valerie Morrison lived in an older, slightly run-down apartment complex on the edge of the city. Her 2-bedroom unit hadn't been updated since the 90s. The furniture was worn, but it was spotless. and the air smelled heavily of pot roast and baked apples. Valerie met them at the door. She was a woman of about 62, short and slightly heavy-set. Her gray hair was styled in a stiff, sprayed bob. She was wearing a burgundy sweater and a floral apron. "Danny!" Finally, she hugged her son fiercely, kissing his cheek before turning her gaze to Alice. "And this must be the famous Alice." "Yes, Mom, this is her." "Hello." Alice extended her hand. Valerie shook it, but her eyes were busy running a full diagnostic scan. She looked Alice up and down, her eyes lingering on Alice's leather tote, her watch, her tailored coat. Come in, the table is set. I made pot roast, Danny's absolute favorite, and homemade rolls." They sat down at the small kitchen table. Valerie fussed over the food, filling plates, pouring gravy. Daniel sat next to Alice. "Eat up before it gets cold," Valerie said, sitting across from them. They ate. The roast was actually incredibly tender, and the rolls were fantastic. Alice ate quietly, hyper-aware that Valerie's eyes were constantly darting toward her. "So, Alice, where did you grow up?" Valerie asked, cutting into her meat. "Right here in the Seattle area." "And your parents?" "My father passed away. My mother lives in Arizona." "So, you're entirely on your own, then?" "Yes." Valerie nodded, chewing slowly. "That must be so difficult. Being alone is a terrible thing. Thank goodness you have my Danny now to take care of you." Alice said nothing. She didn't feel the need to clarify that she was taking care of herself, and that Daniel was an addition to her life, not her savior. "Danny tells me you own a house," Valerie continued, taking a sip of water. "Is it a big place?" "Average. 1,200 square feet." "Goodness, that must have cost a fortune." Alice felt her spine stiffen. "Here we go." "It was reasonable." "Did your parents help you with the down payment? Or did you take out a massive mortgage?" "I bought it myself." Valerie's eyebrows shot up. "Completely on your own? No help?" "Yes. I saved aggressively for years, and took out a small, short-term personal loan to cover the gap. I paid it off quickly." "Well, aren't you a go-getter? You rarely see that these days. Most girls just wait for a man to buy them a house." Alice set her fork down and looked Valerie dead in the eye. "Mrs. Morrison, I don't rely on anyone but myself. That is a fundamental rule in my life." Silence descended on the kitchen. Valerie stared at Alice. Daniel suddenly choked on a piece of roast and started coughing into his napkin. "Well, that's a fine rule for a single woman," Valerie said finally, her tone turning icy. "But you need to understand, once you're a family, everything becomes ours. A husband and wife have to trust each other. Everything should be split equally." "Trust and joint assets are two completely separate legal and emotional concepts," Alice replied evenly. "I can trust a man completely while still retaining my financial independence." Valerie pursed her lips tightly and picked up her water glass. "Well, if you say so." The rest of the meal passed in tense, agonizing silence. Valerie stopped asking direct questions. She talked about her neighbors and her recent retirement from her job as a receptionist at a dental clinic. Daniel nodded along and offered filler responses. Alice just ate. After lunch, Valerie asked Daniel to come into the kitchen to help with the dishes. Alice stayed in the living room, looking at the framed photos on the wall. Little Daniel in his Little League uniform, teenage Daniel holding a basketball, Daniel and his mother on a beach vacation. From the kitchen, hushed voices carried through the thin drywall. Valerie was trying to whisper, but Alice caught it clearly. "Danny? She's so cold. Are you absolutely sure about her?" "Mom, she's just a serious person. She doesn't do small talk. She didn't even smile. And all this talk about independence. Honey, you need a woman who is going to nurture you, support you, not a woman who's going to act like your boss." "Mom, Alice supports me in her own way. Drop it." Alice clenched her jaw. Just as she expected, the mother-in-law had officially deemed her unworthy, a tale as old as time. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through the New York Times app. 10 minutes later, Daniel walked out looking incredibly uncomfortable. "All right, we should hit the road." They said their goodbyes. Valerie hugged Daniel tightly. She gave Alice a stiff, tight-lipped nod. The car ride home was silent. Alice stared out the passenger window at the highway. I'm sorry about my mom, Daniel finally said. For what? She didn't mean anything by it. She just worries about me. I see. Alice. You're not mad, are you? Alice turned her head to look at him. Dan, I don't get mad about other people's opinions. But let me make this very clear. I will never apologize for who I am. If your mother thinks I'm a cold bitch, she's entitled to that opinion. But I am not going to change my personality to appease her. Daniel sighed heavily. I'm not asking you to change. Good, then the subject is closed. They got home. Alice went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. Daniel followed her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Don't be angry, he murmured into her hair. My mom just isn't used to women like you. She spent her whole life relying on men. First my grandpa, then my dad. When my dad left, she fell apart. It's just hard for her to wrap her head around a woman who doesn't need a man to survive. That is her trauma to deal with, not my problem. Alice gently pried his arms off her and poured her tea. Babe, just give her time. She'll get used to you. She'll see how amazing you are. Dan, I have zero desire to prove my worth to anyone. Your mother either accepts reality or she doesn't. I genuinely do not care. Daniel nodded. They didn't bring it up again. The next few months were peaceful. Valerie didn't call, and she didn't visit. Daniel would drive into Seattle to see her every other weekend. Alice never asked to tag along, and Daniel didn't push it. She was perfectly content with the arrangement. In February, Daniel proposed. They were sitting on the couch on a Tuesday night, watching a crime documentary. Suddenly, Daniel stood up, got down on one knee, and pulled a velvet box out of his pocket. Alice Crawford, will you marry me? Alice stared at him. Are you serious right now? Dead serious. I don't want to wait. We've been together for almost a year. I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Alice took the box and opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant white gold band with a modest lab-grown diamond. Exactly what she would have picked. Dan, do you fully understand my terms? What terms? The house remains solely mine. Your name does not go on the deed. We will never merge our finances. I understand. I agree. And your mother is never moving in with us. I know. And she won't come over unannounced, either. Deal. Alice looked at him. He was a good man. He was calm, respectful, and treated her well. She was happy with him. Maybe it was worth taking the leap. All right. Yes. I'll marry you. Daniel wrapped his arms around her and kissed her. Alice felt a rush of warmth, but deep in her gut, a tiny sliver of caution remained. Her instincts were whispering that things were a little too easy. They started planning the wedding, setting a date for April 20th. They agreed on a small, elegant reception at a local winery, capping the guest list at 50 people. Alice had no desire for a massive, flashy circus. Neither did Daniel. When Valerie heard the news, she immediately drove out to Pine Valley to visit them. Congratulations, she said, her voice tight. When is the big day? April 20th, Daniel smiled. I see. Well, I'll be there, obviously. Even though nobody bothered to ask if I approved. Mom. Don't start, Daniel warned. Valerie sat on the sofa and leveled her gaze at Alice. I assume you two plan on living here after the wedding? Yes, Alice replied, standing by the window with her arms crossed. And where does that leave me? You'll continue living in your apartment, Alice said flatly. Valerie's lips thinned into a hard line. Danny is my only child. My husband abandoned me decades ago. I am all alone. My health isn't what it used to be. Mrs. Morrison, Daniel is a grown man. He is starting his own family. But I am his mother. And you will always be his mother. But we will be living in this house, alone. Valerie stood up, her face flushing bright red. You are incredibly selfish. You are stealing my son from me. Alice didn't flinch. I am not stealing him. I am marrying him. Those are two very different things. Danny. Valerie whipped around to face her son. Tell her. Daniel rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. He walked over to his mother. Mom, Alice is right. We're going to live here, just the two of us. You're welcome to visit, but you can't live here. Valerie burst into dramatic. heaving sobs. Daniel put his arms around her and rubbed her back. Alice remained standing by the window, watching the performance. Inside, she felt nothing but cold, analytical detachment. She refused to feel guilty for setting boundaries. Eventually, Valerie dried her tears with a tissue. Fine. If that's how it's going to be, fine. But you have to promise to visit me at least once a month. I promise, Daniel said. Valerie left. Daniel collapsed onto the couch, looking utterly drained. Alice. Maybe we really should visit her more often? She's so depressed alone. Once a month is more than enough. I'm not spending every weekend entertaining her. But she was crying. Dan, your mother is using her tears to manipulate you. You are a 6-year-old man. You need to see that. Daniel winced. She's my mom. It kills me to see her cry. Then you can drive down and see her by yourself whenever you want. I will never stop you from seeing her. But do not demand. Daniel nodded. The argument ended there. Wedding preparations marched on. Alice bought her dress. Daniel rented a tux. They locked in the caterer and sent out the invitations. Valerie called Daniel every single day, trying to insert herself into the planning. Alice politely but firmly rejected all her suggestions. 2 weeks before the wedding, Daniel walked through the front door, looking incredibly anxious. Alice, we need to talk. I'm listening. Alice was at her laptop, finalizing a brief for work. My mom asked me. She thinks it would be a good idea if she had a spare key to the house, just for emergencies. Alice slowly turned her chair to face him. Emergencies? What kind of emergencies? You know, like if we go on vacation to Hawaii, or if someone gets locked out, or if there's a leak, just so she can check on the place. No, Alice. I said absolutely not. This is my house. Your mother is not getting a key to my property. But it's just a precaution. It's standard. It is not standard. It is a violation of my privacy. I will not have someone walking into my house whenever they feel like it. Daniel clenched his fists. You are being ridiculous. We're about to be a family. Being a family does not negate my right to personal space and security. The answer is no, and the decision is final. Daniel spun around, marched out of the room, and slammed the door. Alice sat in the silence, staring at her screen. Every muscle in her body was tense. She knew Valerie wouldn't let this go. Women like her never stopped pushing. The next morning, Daniel apologized. I'm sorry. I overreacted. Mom isn't getting a key. You're right. It's your house. Thank you. But I want your word that we will invite her over for dinner occasionally. I know. I'm not trying to ban her. I just refuse to give her unrestricted access. I get it. They made up, but Alice's gut kept twisting. Something was wrong. Daniel had backed down way too fast. He had surrendered too easily. Exactly a week before the wedding, Alice's phone rang. It was her friend Chloe. Alice, are you 100% sure you want to marry this guy? Why do you ask? Because I was at the Home Depot in town yesterday. I saw Daniel standing at the key-cutting kiosk. He walked away with a little paper bag. Alice's blood turned to ice. Are you absolutely sure it was him? Positive. I know what your fiancé looks like. Understood. Thank you, Chloe. Alice hung up the phone. So, he had gone behind her back. He had sneaked out to make copies right before the wedding. She immediately called Daniel. Dan. Did you make copies of my house keys? What? No. Do not lie to me. Someone saw you at Home Depot. Dead silence on the line. Alice. Look, I was going to surprise you. Surprise me with what? I was going to give them to her at the reception, to show her that she's part of our family now, that we trust her. Alice felt a tsunami of pure, unadulterated rage crash over her. You stole my keys and made copies behind my back? You plan to hand them over to a woman who openly disrespects me. After I explicitly, unequivocally told you. No? Alice, calm down. It's a symbolic gift. It is a betrayal. You completely violated my trust. Stop gaslighting the situation. They're just pieces of metal. They are access to my home. Daniel, if you give her those keys, there will be no wedding. Are you psycho? The wedding is in 7 days. I am dead serious. You have a choice. You either bring those copies home and throw them in the trash in front of me, or we are done. Daniel didn't answer. He just hung up. Alice sat at her kitchen table, her hands shaking. She knew she was right. Daniel had just revealed his true character. He had zero respect for her authority over her own life, and he was willing to deceive his future wife to appease his mommy. But the wedding was a week away. Guests had bought flights. The venue was paid for. Canceling now would be a logistical nightmare. Alice stared at the wall for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and dialed the wedding MC. "Hi, this is Alice. I need to make a slight tweak to the reception schedule." "Of course, Alice. What do you need?" "I need to add a slot right after the toasts. A special surprise from the bride." "Oh, I love that. What are we doing?" Alice calmly explained her plan. The MC let out a low whistle. "Wow. Okay, that is bold. But you're the boss. I'll script it in." Alice went to sleep that night with a clear head. The next morning she woke up at 6 a.m., ate her yogurt, showered, and began preparing for her wedding. Because today, Daniel and Valerie Morrison were going to receive a reality check they would never, ever forget. At 2 p.m., Alice stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bridal suite at the winery. The dress fit perfectly. Her makeup was subtle and natural. Her hair cascaded in soft waves. She looked stunning, but her eyes were completely dead, cold and impenetrable. Chloe stood behind her, adjusting her veil. "Alice, are you absolutely certain you want to do this?" "Yes." "You don't want to just pull the plug now?" "No. He chose to humiliate me behind my back. Now I'm going to humiliate him to his face." Chloe nodded grimly. She had known Alice since law school. She knew Alice never forgave a betrayal. At 3 p.m., the ceremony began. Alice walked down the aisle to a string quartet. The guests stood, beaming at her. Daniel was waiting at the altar, looking handsome and incredibly happy. Valerie was sitting in the front row, wearing a smug smile. Alice reached Daniel. They recited their vows, exchanged rings, and kissed. The crowd cheered. The reception kicked off. Drinks flowed, dinner was served, speeches were made. Alice sat next to Daniel at the sweetheart table, smiling for the cameras, thanking guests, while inside she felt like a block of dry ice. 2 hours in, the MC announced a brief pause in the music. Daniel stood up and tapped his champagne glass. "Excuse me, everyone. I'd like to say a few words." The room quieted down. Alice's posture went rigid. "Today is the best day of my life," Daniel beamed, looking around the room. "I just married the most incredible, brilliant woman. But today is also about family. And I want to give a special token of love to the woman who made me the man I am today." He turned to Valerie, who was sitting at the front table. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a shiny new set of keys on a silver keyring. The guests murmured in confusion. Alice's hands balled into fists under the table. Daniel walked over to his mother and held them out. "Mom, I had a set of keys made for our house. You are always welcome in our home." Valerie gasped, pressing her hands to her chest. Tears streamed down her face. "Oh, Danny, thank you. You're such a good boy." She snatched the keys and hugged him tight. Daniel kissed her cheek. Half the room clapped. A few of Daniel's friends cheered. Alice sat completely motionless. It was done. He had actually done it. He had publicly steamrolled her boundaries to play the hero for his mother. Daniel walked back to the table, sat down next to Alice, and gave her a sheepish, pleading smile. "Alice, don't be mad. It's just a gesture. Please." Alice didn't blink. A moment later, the MC took the microphone. "All right, folks. And now we have a very special surprise gift from the bride, for the groom and his mother." The room erupted in cheers and applause, all eyes turning back to the sweetheart table. Daniel looked confused. Valerie sat up straight, wiping her tears, a triumphant grin on her face. And then, their worlds collapsed. Alice stood up, calmly walked over to the MC, and took the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, then at Daniel, and finally locked eyes with Valerie. "Daniel just handed his mother the keys to my house." Alice's voice echoed through the PA system, cold and level. "He did this without my permission. He did this after I explicitly, repeatedly told him no. He went behind my back, stole my keys, and made illegal copies. He violated my trust, and he betrayed me. The room went deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Daniel's face drained of all color. Alice, what are you doing? Stop, he hissed. I am not finished, Alice snapped, glaring at him. She reached into her clutch, pulled out a folded legal document, and held it up. This is the title deed filed with the county clerk. The sole owner of the property in Pine Valley is Alice I. Crawford, me. Daniel has zero legal rights to that house. His name is not on the mortgage. He has been living there as my guest. The whispers in the room erupted into a loud, frantic hum. Daniel shot out of his chair and lunged toward her to grab the mic. Alice, shut up. You are humiliating me. Alice stepped back, effortlessly dodging him, her eyes flashing with fury. I am not humiliating you, Daniel. You humiliated yourself. You just proved to everyone in this room that you will lie to and betray your wife to appease your mother. I love you, Daniel shouted desperately. If you loved me, you would have respected the one boundary I gave you. Alice turned her attention back to Valerie, who was frozen in her chair. Valerie, put the keys on the table, now. Valerie clutched the keys to her chest. He gave these to me. They're a gift. I won't give them back. It is not a gift. It is stolen property. That is my house, and you have no legal right to access it. Alice pulled her phone out of her clutch and tapped the screen. What are you doing? Daniel grabbed her wrist. I am calling the police. If she does not hand over those keys right this second, I am filing charges for theft and trespassing. Are you insane? Daniel yelled. No. I'm protecting my property. Valerie, trembling with rage and humiliation, slammed the keys down onto the white tablecloth. Fine. Take them, you greedy, heartless bitch. Alice walked over, picked up the keys, and dropped them into her purse. She turned back to the microphone. The reception is over. The marriage is over. Daniel, you have 3 days to get your crap out of my house. If you don't, I will drag it all to the curb. Daniel tried to grab her shoulders. Alice, please, stop. Let's go in the back and talk about this. Alice shoved him off with surprising force. She walked up to Valerie, leaned down, and looked the older woman dead in the eyes. You wanted control over my house. You manipulated your weak son into betraying me to get it. Now you get to live with the consequences. Alice turned on her heel and marched toward the exit. Chloe was right behind her. Alice, wait up. Let's go. I'm done here. They walked out the front doors of the winery, climbed into the waiting limo, and drove away. The annulment was filed the very next business day, because the marriage lasted less than 24 hours, and because they had never commingled finances, there were no marital assets to divide. Alice's lawyer expedited the paperwork, and a judge signed off on the annulment within a month. Daniel tried to fight it. He showed up at Alice's gate in Pine Valley every evening for 3 days, pounding on the wood, crying, begging for forgiveness. Shirley and the other neighbors peeked through their blinds, gossiping, but Alice never even opened the front door. She sat in her living room, working on her laptop, completely ignoring him. On the 4th day, Daniel lost his temper and tried to scale the fence. Alice immediately dialed 911. The police arrived in minutes, handcuffed him, put him in the back of a cruiser, and filed a trespassing and harassment report. That was the last time he ever showed up at her house. Alice meticulously packed all his belongings into cardboard boxes, taped them shut, and stacked them at the end of her driveway. Daniel came to collect them on a Saturday morning with a rented U-Haul. Alice intentionally drove into Seattle for the day so she wouldn't have to look at his face. Valerie called Alice's phone incessantly for 2 weeks. She left unhinged voicemails, sobbing, screaming, accusing Alice of being a sociopath, a monster, of destroying her son's life over a piece of metal. Alice listened to exactly one voicemail, deleted it, and blocked the number. A month later, Alice heard through the grapevine that the scandal had wrecked Daniel. He was so humiliated, he quit his engineering job, sold his Ford Focus, packed up his life, and left the state with his mother. It turned out Valerie had inherited an ancient, rotting farmhouse in Oak Haven, Idaho, a dead-end rural town 100 miles from civilization. The house had been abandoned for a decade, but it had 4 walls and a roof. They packed up and moved there. Alice felt zero pity and zero joy. It was just a fact. They made their choices, and now they were paying the toll. 6 months later, Shirley, the neighbor, came over for coffee and spilled the remaining tea. "I heard through my daughter about your ex-husband," Shirley said, taking a sip of her dark roast. "They're living out in some godforsaken town in Idaho, an old shack that belonged to her parents." "Interesting," Alice noted. "Word is, they're miserable. No jobs out there, no money. Daniel is working part-time stocking shelves at a dollar store. His mother spends her days telling anyone who will listen that her son's life was ruined by a greedy, wicked wife." "Greedy, huh?" Alice smirked. "Oh, yeah. She tells everyone you kicked him out onto the street and stole his house. Now they're living in poverty." Alice didn't bother defending herself. There was no point. Shirley knew the truth, and that was enough. "You did the right thing, Alice," Shirley said, setting her mug down. "A man is only as good as his word. If he looked you in the eye and promised not to do something, and then did it anyway just to publicly humiliate you, good riddance." "You dodged a bullet," Alice nodded. She knew she had. A year went by. Alice lived alone, thrived at her firm, and tended to her garden. In the evenings, she sat on her back deck, sipped wine, and read novels. She was completely at peace. Life without Daniel was infinitely lighter than life with him. Sometimes her friends from the city would ask if she ever regretted how extreme her reaction was. Alice would just shake her head. "Regret what? Trashing a man who lied to my face? But you guys were good together. You couldn't have gone to counseling, tried to fix it? No, I don't negotiate with liars. Once someone proves they can betray you, they will do it again. It's a fundamental rule." And she meant it. Alice believed that unconditional forgiveness was just a polite word for weakness. In August of that year, she met Kyle. They met organically at the Sunday farmers market in town. He was buying Honeycrisp apples. She was buying heirloom tomatoes. They bumped into each other. He dropped his canvas bag, and the apples rolled everywhere. "Oh man, I'm so sorry." He laughed, scrambling to pick them up. "It's fine, let me help," Alice said, grabbing a few. They started chatting. Kyle was an architectural designer. He had recently bought a fixer-upper in the next town over. He was a widower. His wife had passed away from cancer 3 years prior. "No kids. Do you want to grab a coffee?" he asked. "There's a great roaster right around the corner." "Sure." They sat in the coffee shop for 2 hours. Kyle was incredibly grounded. He didn't pry, he didn't trauma dump, and he didn't offer unsolicited advice. He just talked about his blueprints and his love for restoring old wood. "What about you?" he asked. "What's your field?" "Commercial real estate law." "Oof. Heavy hitter." "I just draw houses, but I like seeing people get exactly what they want." They exchanged numbers. Kyle texted her 2 days later. "Alice, I really enjoyed talking to you. Could I take you to dinner this weekend?" "I'd like that." They dated slowly, with zero rush. Kyle was emotionally secure. He never pressured her, never demanded all of her free time. He was just a steady, calming presence. 6 months later, his lease ended while his fixer-upper was facing permitting delays, and he asked to move in with her. Alice sat him down and gave him the exact same speech she gave Daniel. The house was hers. No name on the deed. Split bills. Kyle laughed and agreed instantly. "Alice, I have my own money and my own property. I just want to wake up next to you." "What about your mother?" Alice asked, narrowing her eyes. "She lives in Germany with my older brother. We FaceTime on holidays. She's fiercely independent and couldn't care less about my day-to-day life." Alice exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. There would be no sequel to the Daniel disaster. Alice and Kyle lived together in that house for 18 years. It was a beautiful, quiet life. No screaming matches, no drama, no mind games. Kyle respected her independence to his core. He never once asked for a spare key for a relative, and he never once complained about his name not being on the mortgage. He died suddenly of a massive heart attack when Alice was 54. She buried him, came back to her quiet house, and wept. It was the first time she had cried in decades, but life, as it always does, went on. Today, Alice is 61 years old. She still lives alone in her craftsman home in Pine Valley. The apple trees bloom violently every spring. The yard is immaculate. The house is rock solid. Sometimes, she sits by the fireplace and thinks back to that wedding day. She remembers Daniel's pale, terrified face when she grabbed the microphone, the look of utter defeat on Valerie's face, the gasps of the guests. She doesn't regret her actions for a single second. Actually, about 4 years after the annulment, Alice had a random encounter with Valerie Morrison. Alice was downtown for a meeting and saw Valerie standing at a bus stop in the pouring Seattle rain. She looked haggard, holding 2 heavy plastic grocery bags, her hair frizzy and gray. Valerie spotted Alice. She froze, her eyes widening, and then she aggressively turned her back. Alice walked right up to the bus shelter. "Hello, Valerie." "Hello," Valerie spat, refusing to look at her. "How is Daniel doing? What the hell do you care?" Valerie whipped her head around, her eyes burning with a toxic mix of hatred and exhaustion. "You threw him away, like garbage. You ruined his life." "I didn't ruin anything. I enforced my boundaries against a liar." "A liar?" Valerie scoffed loudly. "He was trying to do something sweet for his own mother, and you destroyed a marriage over a piece of metal." "Not over a piece of metal, Valerie. Over disrespect." "Calm. Ha. Disrespect? You are a cold, unfeeling robot. You don't even have a heart." Alice looked at the miserable, soaked woman and felt absolutely nothing. "Maybe. But I live by my own rules, and I don't let anyone trample them." A city bus pulled up with a screech of air brakes. Valerie hoisted her heavy plastic bags and shuffled onto the bus without another word. Alice stood on the sidewalk and watched the bus pull away into the gray city traffic. She felt no pity and no malicious joy, just a vast, quiet emptiness. She turned around and walked back to her office. To this day, Daniel is still stuck in that rotting house in rural Idaho with his mother. He works dead-end jobs. They barely scrape by. Valerie's health is failing, and she complains bitterly to anyone who will listen. They are miserable, suffocating in a prison of their own making. But those are their choices, their lives, and their consequences. Alice chose herself. She chose her boundaries, her dignity, and her peace, and she has never looked back. Right now, she is sitting on her back deck in Pine Valley, drinking a cup of tea, watching the apple trees sway in the breeze. The wind rustles the leaves. A robin sings on the fence line. It is perfectly quiet. Her house, her life, her rules, and that is all that matters. 4 more years passed. Alice turned 65 and officially announced her retirement as a senior partner at her Seattle commercial real estate firm. Her colleagues threw her a lavish farewell dinner, toasting to her brilliant, unyielding career. She accepted the accolades with grace, but her mind was already back in Pine Valley. She couldn't wait to get home. On her first official morning of retirement, Alice stood in her kitchen, brewing her favorite Earl Grey tea. The quartz countertops still gleamed. The dark wooden beams of the ceiling still held the quiet strength of the house. She had spent over 3 decades in this fortress. It had sheltered her through her youth, held the quiet, respectful love she shared with Kyle, and wrapped her in peace during her solitary years. Later that afternoon, a young, brilliant junior associate from her former firm, a 29-year-old woman named Maya, drove out to visit her. Maya had recently been struggling with a controlling fiancé who was pressuring her to put her hard-earned savings into a joint account to buy a house in his name. Alice had invited her over for a reason. They sat on the back deck, looking out at the sprawling, meticulously kept garden. "You have a beautiful home, Alice," Maya said, her eyes tracing the blooming apple trees. "I can't imagine ever owning something like this on my own." Alice smiled, setting her teacup down. "You can, but you have to be willing to protect yourself. A house is just wood and brick, Maya. What makes it a home is the boundary you draw around it. Do not ever let someone convince you that demanding respect is a sign of selfishness. If a man loves you, he will never ask you to surrender your security to prove your devotion." Maya looked down at her engagement ring, the gears turning in her head, drawing strength from the older woman's unwavering certainty. Alice knew the girl would make the right choice. She was passing the torch of independence. Hundreds of miles away, in the desolate, freezing rural outskirts of Oakhaven, Idaho, Daniel Morrison sat at a chipped formica table in a decaying farmhouse. He was 62 years old, but his hunched shoulders and hollowed eyes made him look closer to 80. Valerie had passed away the previous winter. Her final years had been miserable, filled with bitterness and endless complaints. She had drained the last of Daniel's meager savings with her medical bills, leaving him with nothing but a house that was literally rotting into the earth. The roof leaked, the floorboards sagged, and the wind howled through the gaps in the window frames. Daniel worked the closing shift at the local hardware store. It was minimum wage, physically demanding, and deeply humiliating for a man who used to engineer aerospace components. He reached into the pocket of his faded flannel jacket and pulled out a small, heavy object, dropping it onto the table. It was a keychain. On it hung two shiny, perfectly cut brass house keys. He had kept them for almost 30 years. He stared at the keys to Alice's house. The keys he had cut in secret to appease his mother. The keys that had cost him his marriage, his career, his dignity, and a life of peace and mutual respect with a brilliant woman. For decades, his mother had poisoned his mind, telling him that Alice was the villain, that she was cold and cruel. For a long time, Daniel had forced himself to believe it to survive the misery of his reality. But sitting alone in the freezing, silent farmhouse, with his mother gone and his life entirely wasted, the delusion finally shattered. Alice wasn't cold. She had been perfectly clear. She had asked for one simple thing: respect. And he had chosen to be a coward. He had chosen to act like a little boy trying to please his mommy instead of a man standing by his wife. Daniel picked up the keys, his calloused, arthritic fingers trembling. A heavy, suffocating wave of absolute regret washed over him. There was no one left to blame. There were no second chances. He walked over to the trash can, hovered his hand over it for a long moment, and finally dropped the keys inside. They landed with a dull, hollow thud. Back in Washington, the sun began to set over Pine Valley, casting a warm, golden glow across the red bricks of Alice's house. After Maya left, feeling empowered and ready to take back control of her own life, Alice walked through her home, turning off the lights one by one. She stopped in the hallway and looked at the framed deed hanging on the wall. Alice I. Crawford. She had already updated her will. When her time eventually came, this house wouldn't go to a faceless corporation or be sold off to the highest bidder. She had established a trust. The house would be gifted to a domestic violence shelter in Seattle to be used as a safe haven, a transitional fortress for women who needed a secure, beautiful place to start over and rebuild their own independent lives. Alice locked the sturdy front door, set the alarm, and walked upstairs to her bedroom. The house settled into its familiar, comforting silence. She pulled the duvet over herself, the soft light of the bedside lamp reflecting off the oak furniture. She was safe. She was fulfilled. She had lived a life entirely on her own terms, fiercely protecting her peace, and it had rewarded her with a beautiful existence. Alice reached over, clicked off the lamp, and closed her eyes, drifting into a deep, restful sleep. It was her house, her legacy, her rules, and she had won.